Hi, I'm Dolly Bastet, and welcome back once again to Dolly's World. And what a world it is. Look at it. On either side of me, behind me. Why, it's like walking into a Parisian cafe. And last year, Mike and we did this wonderful series of segments from Ferris Farms. It was so popular that we decided to come back again because with the seasons and the changes, everyone has questions about their gardens. It started in segments, but guess what? It's a full-length show. So sit back and relax and enjoy. And of course, it is one of those hot days again, so if you just want to sit there and watch the sweat roll down off me, you can. But we have some wonderful answers to some of the questions you have. And I know we've had a crazy spring and early summer this year, haven't we?
This has been one of the oddest ones in a while. We've had, if people remember, this is right now, it's early June, but if people remember back in January, it was very warm. It was probably like in the 40s, sometimes even warmer in the 50s in January. We thought, well, boy, we're going to make it through winter. This is going to be one of those very easy winters. And all of a sudden, February came, and we got slammed with
That's right.
with very cold weather, which presented a lot of unique problems for plants that we're seeing this spring and this early summer.
Well, didn't they start with like all of a sudden you saw a very early growth with the medium weather? And then the winter, it hit it, and then the leaves and everything just turned yucky.
Exactly. Normally what happens in fall, plants start getting ready for the winter, and leaves start falling off, and plants really start getting ready for that cold. They basically they go dormant. Evergreens do. They stop growing. Mm-hmm. The leaves get tougher, and so they can withstand the really cold weather and the winds. And other plants that drop their leaves are getting ready for winter too. And once they go dormant, they want to stay that way. And usually cold weather does that. But once we had that warm up in January, a lot of plants, especially the ones that kind of bloom in early spring, that are very sensitive to the warmer temperatures that we normally get in early spring, it kind of woke them up a little bit. And also a lot of the evergreens that normally are very, very tough and can withstand the really cold winter winds kind of woke up out of dormancy a little bit, and they tried to start growing. And then the main problem that happened, once the weather got super cold, they were basically shocked. Some of the plants that came out of dormancy, it maybe didn't kill them, but it zapped them just enough where there was a lot of major dieback on evergreens, as well as trees that push regular leaves out, deciduous trees, especially things that bloom early in the spring, like peach trees and a lot of the fruit trees and azaleas and things like that.
Well, I go, when we drive around the neighborhoods, you see this beautifully manicured home and two trees in the front, which they're hoping, beyond hope, that big brown spot is going to grow out. Yeah. And I laughed when we talked about it last night, because I said, my solution is definitely not a scientific one. It's to get down and get a little green spray paint until it grows in. Yeah. But you have the answer to all of this. Well, so why don't we get started?
Maybe not the answer, maybe a few possible answers or solutions.
Well, let's hear the possibilities.
We knew there was a problem. The first thing, we're usually closed for the winter. We opened up in March, early April, and people just started bringing samples of plants, of leaves and stems of things that were definitely going wrong in their landscape. And that's when I started looking around too. As I was driving around, I started looking around at a lot of any of the evergreens that were out in the open, holly trees, things like that. They were really starting to turn brown on the outer edges, and it had a lot of people concerned. And pretty much what I talked about before is exactly what happened. Those leaves kind of came to life a little bit. The cold weather shocked them, and in response, the outer edges were dying back. And a lot of people thought that a lot of their trees and shrubs were actually totally dying. That did happen to a few plants, but for the most part, when people brought samples, and I kind of showed them that, look, it's the outer leaves on the evergreens that are brown, but look, when we cut into the tissue, it was still nice and green underneath, and you could see where the buds were, where the leaves joined the stems, that those were still good, and if they just took care of the tree, maybe fertilized it, if we had a drought water, that hopefully it was going to push some new growth out. And basically now we're into June right now, and a lot of the trees that I saw that were really bad, probably in March and April, yeah, they actually grew out of it. But something that did help was anytime you see any damage like that to the leaves or the stems, not a bad idea to get out there and maybe prune them off, because a lot of times when there are dead stems, dead leaves, it actually sometimes will attract insects and other things because they think that the tree is seriously weakened. So anybody that went out there and just lightly sheared their plants back, fertilized them like they normally do in early spring, usually most of their plants did come back, and they had very little problems with them.
Okay, what would you suggest? Now you have a variety of things here.
Roses are kind of tough in New Jersey. We have, especially now we're getting into June and July, we're going to start getting that really hot, humid weather, and the leaves tend to get spots on them. I mean, of any of the plants that are sold throughout the state, this one has the most problems because they're very susceptible to getting leaf diseases. But not only roses, people bring in samples of rhododendrons, almost any kind of plant, and they seem to always have a lot of spots on leaves, and people are very concerned about the spots, and sometimes they should be and sometimes they don't have to be.
Okay, when is when?
Okay, well, if you see, the leaves are very important on any of the plants because the leaves make the food for the plant so that it can give you the flowers that you want or the foliage that you want. And if you get too many spots on the leaves, that cuts down on the amount of light that gets to the leaves, and the leaves can't make enough food, and the plant suffers. Or if they do get a disease and you get a lot of spots on the leaves will actually start falling off.
Yeah.
But a lot of people actually are causing the problem rather than Mother Nature. This year we didn't. The air's been kind of relatively dry. We haven't had any extended rain, so there really isn't a reason for having a lot of spots and a lot of fungus on leaves this year. But the main problem that I see people, or the main misconception they have, most people think when they water their plants, they want to get the leaves wet. And in fact, if I ask somebody, well, how often do you water? Well, I water every day, and I make sure I water all the leaves. And I usually get kind of a sour look on my face because that's really the worst thing that you can do.
And we all know that sour look, Mike.
Well, yeah. Sometimes I look that way in the morning, but usually I lighten up by the day. But the one thing that most people should realize that anytime you water your plants, you always want to water everything very thoroughly and very deeply. That's going to give you the best root system. Roots need oxygen in order to grow, and if you keep the soil constantly wet, and if you're watering them every day, and the soil stays in the water stays in the soil, it tends to drive the oxygen out of the soil. A lot of times you wind up with root rot, which hurts the plants. But more important, if you wet those leaves every single day, moisture is what causes fungus problems. I always make the analogy of athlete's foot. You can't get athlete's foot, which is that one thing nobody really wants, if your feet stay dry. If your feet stay dry, you'll never get athlete's foot. It's because your feet are wet or you're sweating. And it's the same with plants. If you can keep these plants' leaves dry, you won't have any spots on your leaves.
I'll never think of my spots any differently now.
But there are other ways. I mean, sometimes if you do have spots, let's say we have a lot of humid weather and you want to clear those spots up,
right.
You can't cure what happened already, but there are some different things you could do so that the new growth coming out won't have the spots on. And we like to recommend organic ways now. I mean, there's plenty of chemicals.
And I'm so happy about that.
And if you want to go that route, chemicals do work if you use them properly and you don't want to use them too often. But there are some new chemicals out now that actually can help spots on leaves or help prevent the spots on leaves. There's one out now called Serenade, and it's very unique. It's not actually a chemical, it's actually an organism. We're now selling organisms in bottles that kill the bad organisms. So this is a good organism. It's a type of bacteria that actually will keep the fungus type problems that cause the spots on the leaves. It keeps them at bay or greatly reduce them so that you don't have those.
You spray that, do you mix it?
This is a liquid, it's a concentrate. You always read the directions on the back, you mix it in water, and you would spray it on periodically, and it really does work.
You know, Mike, you emphasize that one thing, because I know from working with you often that that is so important. It's really like taking medicine. If they say take two. If they say put 2 capfuls in, that's all you put in.
Definitely.
It's 2 capfuls.
And a lot of people make the mistake, they figure, well, if 1 tablespoon is good, well, 2 are going to be better. No, you always use what's recommended on a label, because that's the amount that you need that's going to make it work the best. You don't want to burn the leaves, you don't want to hurt anything. But again, I still think that the most important thing you can do is when you water your plants, always water the soil, direct the water at the soil. Try not to get the leaves wet. If you do that, there's 90% of your problems right there.
Something else I found too with my garden, because it has, over the years I've put compost and it's just crazy. You know, they come up and you think you have thinned them out in the spring and then they've invaded another piece of territory. Mm-hmm. They've gotten too thick. And there's no light that can get down, especially with phlox.
Oh, well, that helps trap moisture. Yeah, as plants get bigger and broader, or if you have plants planted too close together,
right,
as an example, a rose. Let's say if you planted this rose, you'd really want to, if you're going to plant two of them, you don't want to plant them pot to pot, because this thing's going to grow probably 3 to 4 foot wide. So you want to allow for that. You want to maybe ask questions, look at the label, see how wide it's going to grow, because when you plant this thing out in the open, and it's wide enough, it's far enough away from this plant, they're both going to tend to grow together eventually. But the more light they have, the more air circulation, that keeps the leaves dry. When you smash something together, that traps the moisture, that aggravates leaf diseases also.
Okay, so what else did we have over here? We had myco stem.
Yeah, a tongue twister. There's some other, we keep talking about organics. Years ago, we were told, oh, organics are going to be the next big thing. The consumer really wants organics. Never really turned out that way. No. But I would say in the last 5 years, people are really turning back to organics. They want to do stuff as natural as they can. They don't want to introduce a lot of chemicals into the environment. This one here is called mycostem. It's mycorrhiza bacteria. That's the good bacteria that colonizes on the plant roots. It also comes in a, you could buy it mixed with a fertilizer. It's actually kind of a starter type thing. It's the mycorrhiza bacteria. They give you some fertilizer with it, really to get those plants off to a good start. And as the good thing about it, as those plants grow and the roots grow, the beneficial bacteria actually grows right along on the roots, and it really gives you a much stronger, healthier plant without using chemicals.
Well, we seem to have pretty much touched on what you should or shouldn't do. I just have one question before we sign off.
Sure.
And this is a selfish question, because I bought a ton of these South African daisies.
Cave daisies, yeah.
And I put them in pots, and they grow like you can't believe. Mm-hmm. But in pots, they started to flop. So what I found that I had to do was cut all this stuff back and almost start again.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to do that. A lot of people, they buy a plant, they put it in the ground, they grow it.
I know.
They don't want to touch anything or think they're going to hurt anything, but plants grow very rapidly at this time of the year, and if you fertilize them the right way, which you should if you want to get a lot of flowers, a lot of times it does make the stems and the plant grow, sometimes too much. Never, we usually don't worry about cutting plants back. We even do that here a lot. If the plants get kind of leggy, we just go through with scissors or pruning shears. Actually, if you just cut this back and cut these stems off, in fact, by me pinching the stem off right here, Dolly's going to gasp because I'm cutting off the flower here. But
no, I'm not, because I do it myself.
I cut the stem off here where there's a shoot coming out here. Every place a leaf joins a stem, you're going to get brand new shoots. So if I did this on this whole plant, in about 3 weeks, this is going to be flowering again, and it'll probably be 4 or 5 times as dense, much more flowers on it. And that's what you periodically should do. You take a walk around the garden. If something's out of bounds, too wide, too late, you just go out there with a pair of pruning shears, cut them back lightly, fertilize them, and within 2 or 3 weeks at this time of the year, they're growing like crazy, and you're going to get a ton more flowers on them.
Well, we have some great plants to show you, which I don't know that you can grow yourself, that you don't always have to keep buying every year. So Mike, why don't you take it away? It's not too late to plant.
Oh no, right now it's about mid-June.
Your nights are warm, so.
Oh, it's very warm now. In fact, usually by around now people kind of stop planting things. They think it's almost getting too late, but we're just really getting into the main part of the growing season right now.
And really nice, great stuff. That's coming in.
Well, plants really thrive. Most of the plants that we really want, the flowers and the foliage, really thrive with the warm nights and the warm soil temperatures. Mm-hmm. Everybody thinks of May as the best planting time, but May, everybody's anxious from the winter. They want to get everything planted early, but actually June is the best growing time to really get the plants well established and get them flowering, and they're going to give you tons of flowers from now up until frost.
Well, let's start. Okay?
Okay, well, we've got a few different things here. This is a brand new perennial. It's been out a few years. This one actually won an award, a very prestigious award. This is a perennial. A lot of people don't garden too much.
Let's run that annual and perennial.
Yeah, annual and perennial. It's a lot of misconceptions about what's an annual and what's a perennial.
A perennial.
Okay, perennial it does exactly what it means. It comes back every year. It's a perennial plant. It comes back every single year.
And it gets bigger.
They normally do. Some do get bigger, but there's some misconceptions about perennials too, because a lot of people buy perennials thinking, oh, I'm going to plant this, it's going to come back every year, and it's going to flower the whole season. But most of that's not true. There are some pros and cons of anything that you plant. The pros about perennials, they do come back. They usually get fuller and bigger every single year.
They're the basics. They're, to women, the basic black of their wardrobe. They're the basics of your garden.
I wouldn't know about wardrobes,
Well,
but
think of it that way, Mike.
okay,
Work on
I'll think about it that way. But there are a few perennials. There's a lot of people always come in expecting perennials to bloom the whole season. Most of them don't. This one here is an exception. This one is a hardy geranium. It's a perennial geranium. Whereas this here, most people know geraniums as
Right.
looking something like that. This blooms the whole season, but of course it dies at the end of the season. It goes up until frost and then it just dies. And you have to
Right.
replant them every single year. This hardy geranium actually has a very tough root system. It survives in winter. Once we get into June, it has these lovely violet blue flowers, and this will keep blooming. This is one of the few perennials that I can say that will bloom pretty much the whole season.
Does this need light, shade?
This one pretty much likes bright light. Most plants that like bright light need they need at least more sun than shade. So
Okay, so
just
you
'cause
don't plant this in your shade garden.
No, if it's more shade than sun, it'll probably get some blooms, but not quite as much. So that's one thing you have to look out for. How much sun does it actually need? And you don't have to be discouraged if you don't get a full day sun, but more sun is better and will give you a lot of blooms. This one actually happened to win. I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before. There's a perennial plant association. This one won the award as the perennial of the year because it did so well throughout the United States. In so many areas, and it bloomed so well, and it was so trouble-free. This variety is called Roseanne, and this is probably the best of all the. There are a number of other hardy geraniums, but this one does blooms its head off and comes back reliably every single year.
Well, I hope you have a load of them because they're just
Well,
going to go.
If not this year, next year,
go.
but
Okay.
Okay.
They are beautiful, though.
Yeah,
I
that's-
think,
so that's-
yeah,
that's
I
a-
saw them in one of the magazines,
yeah,
actually.
that's a real nice perennial. Another new plant. This has been out for a few years.
That's adorable. That's
but
pretty.
I just discovered this one. There's so many new plants coming on the horizon now. There's a lot of breeders breeding in Europe, and a lot of stuff that grows there does fine here. And they're coming out. There's certain companies that are marketing some of these varieties and really pushing them. And the way I found this one, we usually go out to Penn State has field trials where they bring all the best and the newest types of annuals and some perennials, and they actually test them out in a broad open area. There's thousands of varieties, and they test them in full sun, basically in full sun and also in shade, testing them to see how well they would do in somebody's backyard. Because who wants a plant that's going to look great out of the greenhouse, and then you bring it home and it doesn't do too well.
Right.
So we like to go to that every single year because we go there probably, I think, at end of July, early August, and we see what looks really good right now. It's been out there in the blazing sun. It's been out there through heavy rains. What looks really good? And this was one of the ones we picked up last year. It's an oxalis. It kind of looks like a shamrock. It's in kind of the clover family. This one actually is good for shade. This one can take moderate shade to medium shade. It probably will do okay in the sun too, but if you can envision this getting, say in the next month or two, maybe 3 or 4 times wider than this and covered with these white flowers, it's a really good brand new plant
Little
that's just been
mounding
available.
plant.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's different. It's got very nice purple foliage. Just another good plant that we saw that in August, early August, looks really good. It's going to look good from spring all the way through August.
That's important because around August, everything starts to get,
Yeah.
I don't know, that old look.
Well, some plants can take it, some plants can't. Another tip I want to give everyone.
I know how they feel.
Another tip I want to give everyone. In fact, we had this. A lot of people came. Will be coming back this year, and they'll say, "Hey, my plants were doing well going into June and July, and then they start not doing too well in August." And we usually try to go through with them maybe how often do you water, this and that. And when I get to the point when I get to the part of the diagnosis, how often do you fertilize? Oh, we don't have to fertilize. I say, what? They go, we don't have to fertilize. There was fertilizer in the potting soil. You got to be careful. A lot of the things are a little misleading on the bags of fertilizer. It may say there's like 3 months supply of fertilizer in it, but these plants are growing so rapidly and they're blooming
use
so
it
much.
up.
They really need fertilizer, and that's another thing that a lot of people don't do. They put the plants in, they fertilize them when they first plant them. You really got to continue fertilizing them periodically.
How often?
Depends what you use. If you just use a basic granular garden fertilizer like 5-10-5 or 10-6-4.
Or something like Miracle Grow. It's,
All right,
you see.
Miracle Grow is the stuff you add. There's different types of Miracle Grow. The
Right.
one you add to the water, you probably want to use it at least every maybe 2 weeks to week and a half. Certain plants maybe every week. The faster they're growing, the more they're flowering, the more fertilizer they
Really?
do need.
Okay.
But you don't want to over fertilize either. But But the people that don't fertilize, usually by midsummer, the plants are kind of start to peter out a little bit. We need food in order to grow and look good, and the plants are the same way. You got to make sure you keep them fertilized, especially when they're pushing a lot of new growth and a lot of flowers over the summer.
Okay, now, you have some stuff in here. These are interesting
okay.
looking. Whatever.
Yeah, probably nobody, unless somebody's an old farmer, knows what these are. Now, here we are, it's early June already. These are actually, some people come in looking for strawberry plants, and everybody wants strawberries in little pots already growing. This is the way they really should be planted, probably a little earlier than this. These are actually strawberry roots. And we're kind of getting away from growing plants this way anymore. People want them in containers already grown. But there's a lot of stuff,
and cream,
but there's plenty of stuff from June that you can still plant the roots, you can still plant the seeds, and there's still plenty of time to grow stuff. There's actually like 25 plants in a bundle, and these are actually planted. You would take each one and plant them in the ground, probably right up to about here, right about where my fingers are. And this new shoot will start growing, grow new leaves. Probably by about the middle of July, you're going to get new, they call them, it'll be like suckers coming out that will reach out and root in. By the end of August, early September, you're going to have a nice bed of green strawberry plants that next year you're going to get about a quart of berries for every one that you plant, every one of these plants that you put in now.
They don't really produce, though, the first year,
Not the first year, but if you put them in from roots, which is probably the best and the easiest and cheapest way to plant them, they grow very quickly, and then they get a good root system established, and next year you'll have tons of strawberries and make a good ground cover in front of other shrubs, as long as you're not using any chemicals on your shrubs. And a lot of people just don't do these anymore because I guess strawberries have been so cheap in the store.
I don't think they believe that it is as easy as that.
You know, years ago, when we were here 25 years, all the old timers, that's what they asked for, but things have shifted. A lot of people have gotten away. They really don't know how to plant this stuff or where this stuff even comes from. But that's a very easy way of planting strawberries. Another thing we've gotten away from is even just planting seeds. People always come in here looking for established plants. They want cucumber plants, zucchini plants, and we'll happily oblige them to grow them and sell them to you. But if you plant seeds early June, you know, the ground's warm, the sun warms the soil very quickly. Seeds can be started very easily and very quickly at this time of the year. Here I have an example. These are some squash seeds, zucchini squash, and
they're big. They're a good size.
Oh yeah, the good size seeds, almost like a pumpkin seed. They're colored. There's a little bit of a protectant on there to prevent against diseases. But you could buy seeds without any fungicides or anything on them. But it's as easy as just taking the seed and putting it on the surface of the soil and just pushing it in. And this could be your garden soil. Of course, I'm using some potting soil right here in a container. And the same thing, just take the seed, just push it in twice the thickness of the seed. That's the general rule. So if it's a real tiny seed, very shallow, the bigger the seed, you push it a little deeper. Now, believe it or not, I did these 5 days ago. So all I did 5 days ago was I took some of those seeds. These happen to be cucumbers. Pushed the seeds in, watered them. Now it's nice and warm, and I didn't do anything special. Just left them on a cart. 5 days later, boom, they sprouted. These are probably ready to transplant in about another week. These are the seed leaves. Once they get the new leaves on them, and it's the same thing with zucchini. You know, I did those 5, maybe 6 days ago on these, and you could see how they've sprouted already. They're off to a good start, and I can transplant these into my garden probably in about another week.
There's a little edge of it.
Well, that's how when the seed comes up. These are the seed leaves, they call them. These are cotyledons. These aren't true leaves. These are what come out of the seed and grow and get the plant off to a fast start.
So you wait.
You wait for these to fall off, and then you'll see brand new leaves coming out of these that'll look a little different than these. When those come out, then it's safe enough to pop these out and plant them in the ground, and you're all set to grow zucchini. And zucchini can be planted from in our area. You can plant them from May all the way almost. I planted zucchini the middle to the end of July, and I'll still get zucchini in the fall. Same with cucumbers. People plant cucumbers once, they don't bear the whole season, and you really should get some plants growing, 2 or 3 weeks later, plant some new ones, just this way. Very easily done and very cheaply done from seed.
Okay, we must move along, my friend.
Yep.
And this. I find these fascinating
because
I do grow these myself.
We've had these around for years. They're getting more and more popular. This is something called elephant ears, which is it's just a big tropical foliage plant. You can see different types of basically when these get to full size, I've been at a garden, and he must have had them for a number of years. They were gigantic. These leaves just get gigantic. Yeah, you can grow them in containers on your deck or patio. part sun, part shade. They could take bright light also. And they're very easily grown. All we did with these, this is the bulb from them. We just took this bulb, planted at the bottom of the pot with some good potting soil, watered it. It probably takes about 4 weeks or so for them to sprout, but they sprout. But in this weather, the way the weather's warm right now, they grow very rapidly. Yeah, and these plants will keep doubling in size about every 3 weeks now. So if you can imagine, probably by about middle of July, these are going to be a nice big full plant that will look great on a deck or patio. We're actually planted in the ground.
Well, I find that they're great. I use them to screen the filter for the pond, the fish pond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're beautiful as a screen.
And the other good thing is they're not hardy. It's not something you could plant. It's not a perennial like this hardy geranium. But if you plant them in a container or in the ground, at the end of the season, when a frost does come and kill the foliage, it'll kill the stems and kill the foliage. If you cut that foliage off and gently dig around, you'll have a bulb in here probably twice the size. Because if we started with a bulb this size, all the leaves that came up that are growing are making food, making this bulb bigger. You'll wind up with a real big bulb. And then what you do, you dig that up and you store it someplace where it's cool and dry, and then you could save this over the winter, put it like in a cellar where it's cool and dry, and then repot it probably about maybe early April inside your house in a big pot, and then you could put this out again next June.
I actually tried that last year on your advice, and it worked.
Oh yeah.
And they're doing beautifully. Well, that's it, folks. Our tour for the day is over. I hope you had a good time. You know, I could talk with Mike by the hour. And again, if you have any questions that you want to talk to Mike about, email to Ferris Farms. We'll show the address. In the meantime, take care, happy gardening, and I'll see you next month.